It's Thursday, the day the Skywalker saga comes to an end. Although, quite honestly,
Does it?
well, the movies continue on without Skywalker, which pretty much this new trilogy was without Skywalker for the most part too. I think the Skywalker saga pretty much died with Return of the Jedi, but in any event, Saga comes to an end here today, and we're here to check it out. Now the movie starts in an hour. It's usually packed out here with fans waiting, and not so much. AMC, no face paint, masks, weapons. If you have epilepsy, be forewarned. I love Playmobil, but this kind of seems like Lego Movie Light. So at AMC, they have these nifty R2 popcorn buckets. The top of R2, his head, if you will, is a drink. The base is for popcorn. It's 50 simoleons, or Republic credits, or you can get a red or blue popcorn bucket. 11 with popcorn, 6 unfilled. We're going with the Sith bucket. So it is almost the moment of truth. We have 20 minutes to go. The crowd actually showed up here en masse at the last second. We're here with Campbell. I have seen every Star Wars movie on opening day with Campbell since Revenge of the Sith.
At least 2005, yeah.
Yeah. Prior to that original trilogy, every movie was opening weekend with my dad. Then it was Mary. And now we've carried this tradition forward. We've got a lot to button up here. I'm excited. Very tentative.
Yeah, even me, and I'm Mr. Positive.
Campbell loves Last Jedi.
I do actually love Last Jedi.
It was a twist. It's not a bad thing. Everybody has their own thing. I was very much on the fence with Last Jedi. There's like 30, 40 minutes that I would cut out of it. So I think that there's a lot to work with here, a lot to course correct if they want to make the fans happy, and we'll see how things go.
And Disney needs a better bottom line, so they do want to make the fans happy.
Disney needs that money, yo. They never stopped playing the hold music for people cycling in the theater. And now this has gone from a horrid war story to somewhat whimsical. So we're about to do our traditional post-Star Wars meal at Denny's. Not sponsored, unfortunately. Quick thoughts on the movie, no spoilers?
It was good.
It was good?
I had to pee.
Yes, she ran through the theater. That was important to say. Yep. And you, what did you think about the movie?
Amazing.
Yeah?
Amazing. It was good.
I was like, Mary cried over and over again in the movie.
Crying
there was one part, I can't say, but it was
more than one part.
Yeah,
well,
it was repeatedly.
Yeah, but it was one.
But it was one part, just repeatedly.
Throughout the whole movie.
Campbell, did you like it?
I did, yeah.
And there you have it. Well, it is Sunday night. I have had 2 viewings of The Rise of Skywalker. My feeling, for the most part, remains the same. I overall really enjoyed the movie. If you guys are looking for a score for me, I guess it would be like a 7 out of 10 or 3.5 out of 5. The rest of this video is going to be somewhat spoilery or very spoilery, depending on how things go in thought process. I don't have anything written out, but I know I had anticipated doing this video and then had second guesses about doing this video. Anytime that I mention anything Star Wars, there is undoubtedly one side that says Star Wars sucks and the other side that says Star Wars is great. I think this movie doesn't do anything to help the divide that The Last Jedi created, but we'll get to that in a moment. This movie is billed as the final installment in the saga, which I have always interpreted to be the Skywalker Saga. Which is interesting because I think these movies have really gone from the original trilogy kind of being the documentation of Luke Skywalker and his journey from being the innocent farm boy to being the leader or kind of the supreme Jedi Knight representation for the rebellion. The prequel trilogies kind of turned that on its head, in my opinion, and kind of made it the overall 6 stories to be the focal point, not of Luke Skywalker, but of Anakin Skywalker as inevitably Darth Vader, where we have the childhood Anakin rising up through the point of assuming the Darth Vader mantle. And then further along, finding out that the rebellion is led by his son and then daughter as well. The newer trilogy really puts an additional spin into all of this, because those characters somewhat seemingly fade, where we only have Luke for a few moments at the end of The Force Awakens, and then in a part that I think a lot of legacy Star Wars fans felt unhappy about with The Last Jedi, and then just having obviously a smaller role or Force Ghost role in The Rise of Skywalker. So we've gone from this being the Skywalker saga to now, I guess, the Palpatine Saga, because Palpatine also has his story arc from the prequel trilogy up through the original trilogy, and now capping off this trilogy. So it's kind of a shared experience, I think, where we can't just call this the Skywalker Saga anymore. It's more the Skywalker / Palpatine Saga. I do think this movie is very good for what it is, and what it is, or what has been handed to J.J. Abrams to work with in this movie. And I'm not saying that as, it's only good because of the limitations. I think it is an enjoyable watch overall, and does really feel Star Wars-y to me, where there's that feeling of impending doom, or not being able to succeed, and then having this overwhelming euphoria of we're gonna do this and we're gonna succeed or have some type of victory. Having said that, J.J. Abrams obviously had to work with some choices that were made in the second installment of this new trilogy. So obviously two of the biggest decisions that Rian Johnson had left J.J. Abrams. One was the death of Snoke in The Last Jedi, and not killing Leia and taking the storyline direction instead of killing Luke in The Last Jedi. Two very decisive moments for fans that have complained since The Last Jedi taking place, and two very big pieces for JJ to have to work out of, right? So we had to really figure out who was going to be the overall enemy for The Rise of Skywalker, and therefore Palpatine. I don't think for a second that Palpatine overall was an initial scope or vision for J.J. Abrams or Kathleen Kennedy or anybody else at Lucasfilm for making these films. And if folks say that there is, or that was the initial intent, I'd love to see the original scripts. I think one of the biggest downfalls of this new trilogy is the fact that they played handoff, and we had a script as a baton that was handed between each storyline instead of having an overall arc and each piece planned out and written out beforehand. Leia or Carrie Fisher not being available or passing away before this being filmed, and using pieces that she's filmed previously or sound bites that she's filmed, works for the most part. And I gotta be honest, I didn't anticipate that character having as big of a role or as many scenes or anything as we ended up with in The Rise of Skywalker. I think that it works overall for having Leia train Rey, and the training sequence scene worked out fine. I like that scene. I like the dynamic between the two of them. On the flip side, while I enjoy Palpatine as an ultimate villain, I don't necessarily understand how he came back, and I'm sure that the story group at some point will explain that, whether he was a clone or something else. I'm sure, one of the other things that I'm always very vocal about is that it'll be solved in like a comic or a book or something else, maybe a cartoon series or something down the line, because we just go all these different avenues of media to figure things out and try to fill in the gaps. But be it as it may, Palpatine is back. Ian McDiarmid is awesome as always. The character, to me, as far as the storyline for that character, it just doesn't really make sense. Obviously we get that scene when you first walk in and there's a bucket full of Snokes off to the side, and he's playing the puppet master that's been the voice or persona, where he's made Snoke, and he's been the voice of Vader and Kylo Ren's head, etc. to bring everybody together, and then ultimately strike him down because somebody's going to take the throne, but it's going to be him or somebody. That whole piece is really confusing to understand. Like, you know, ultimately when he dies, which is what he wanted to happen, the other subsequent pieces don't happen. It's confusing, but I think in the way of Star Wars, not everything needs to be solved for, which it brings up my other counterpoint of things that I take with a grain of salt with this movie, and that's the ending where everything is solved for, including Chewie getting his Medal of Yavin. And I think probably casual fans watch this movie and they don't understand, like Maz Kanata handing Chewbacca the Medal of Yavin, which was an oversight when they filmed The New Hope, where Han and Luke both get their medals for blowing up the Death Star, and Chewbacca's there more as like a beast instead of a person or character that should be interfacing. So Chewbacca gets stiffed in A New Hope, and then we wait until Palpatine is killed and we award him the Medal of Yavin. It was just really weird, that scene. I do like the journey of the heroes, and I love that they're collaborative together and back together and working as one, and they kind of, it's almost like they make it a thing of saying, like, you know, when Rey's like, I need to go on and do this by myself, you know, then Finn is like, yeah, sure, but we're going to do it together. And then Poe's like, yeah, but we're going to do it together. And same thing with like C-3PO, we're a team, we're all got to do it together. And it's like overtly righting the wrong of the big complaint from The Last Jedi, where everybody split off and did their own thing. The other kind of course correction, I think, or a couple of course corrections, I think, that were obvious for folks that didn't like The Last Jedi. One was the fact that for everybody going off to do their things, when they're looking for the Wayfinder, Rose is left behind, because she needs to study about the ships, about the Star Destroyers, I think, in the movie. I mean, I didn't take notes, but I recall that the lines being she literally needed to study, and that was the big thing, I think, kind of a jab back to the Rian Johnson film, as well as when Rey is frustrated and is throwing everything at the wrecked TIE fighter and goes to throw the lightsaber, and Luke catches it and says, that's no way, or you need to treat the lightsaber with respect, which I thought, kind of a blatantly obvious throwback to her handing the saber to Luke in The Last Jedi and him whipping it over his shoulder. So those pieces aside, I really do love some aspects of the movie. I love that the movie starts with such an aggressive tone to begin with Kylo Ren kind of cutting through these guardians of Vader's castle on Mustafar looking for the Wayfinder. I love more Knights of Ren. I wish that there were more Knights of Ren in The Last Jedi, but I think we kind of hiccuped a little bit, like we introduced them in The Force Awakens, didn't have anything in Last Jedi, and then you have them in this movie. And there's a really corny line in this movie too, with the stormtroopers as they walk in and like, oh, Knights of Ren, that's pretty cool. Like, we needed to be reminded who they were. That was cool. I love, and I can't remember the character's name off the top of my head, the former interest of Poe Dameron and friends with Babu Frick. Babu, I love that character, and that character's there for one reason, and it's for people to gush over, like another like cutesy type character, but it works. And I like the side story. I know that there's complaints about the fact that it kind of feels like a video game quest, and you got to do one quest to get to another quest, with the fact of needing to get the dagger and have C-3PO interpret the dagger and so forth. But those types of like little side quests were really fun for me to invest in. John Williams makes a cameo in that section of the movie as well. And for those that don't know, John Williams, a composer of Star Wars scores. That was literally a moment that I think I broke character in the movie theater the first night when I sat next to Campbell, and we literally cheered and high-fived each other when we saw John Williams appear on screen. awesome moment. I feel like every character had things to do. Finn did his Finn things, Poe did his Poe things, and then you had really the central dynamic between Rey and Kylo Ren, and I liked both of those characters in this movie. I enjoyed the continuation of the fact that they can still interact with each other, even though they're not together with each other at the time. I thought the lightsaber battles were spectacular. Some of the cinematography in the movie and the photography is just amazing to me. And I think that those are things that really kind of suck me in as a viewer as well. But the battle on the ruins of the old Death Star, just phenomenal. The introduction of Han and the death of Leia together, really emotional for me, and maybe for other Star Wars fans as well. But having Han, you know, kind of say, come back home, and Kylo Ren conceding and you know, saying, you know, it was the mirror image of that scene from The Force Awakens where he had something to do and he didn't know if he could do it or not. But this time, making the right decision and getting rid of his saber and you know, fully kind of turning back to Ben Solo. There are a lot of things like that in the movie that I really enjoyed. Having to shoehorn in Lando Calrissian, you know, which kind of funny thing, like he's living on the sand planet when he could be, you know, they show Cloud City later in the movie. Like, why would you leave Cloud City to be on the sand planet is beyond me. But funny story aside, Billy D. Williams was at Star Wars Weekends multiple times, and we've had conversations that were as he's signing things or interacting with fans, and we had conversations about moving from New York to Orlando, and just funny enough or ironic enough, his biggest thing when he'd talk to me was, why would you ever want to move from New York to like a hellhole like Florida with all of this heat, and the heat is overwhelming and everything, and then here we are with Lando living on this sand planet. It just struck me funny personally anyway, but the side quests, they work for me. The introduction of the force healing, and this is another thing that I think folks are on the fence about, I didn't mind that, you know, because I think, you know, these newer stories to me are kind of like the Star Wars extended universe books, right? Where we had the original trilogy, and I, you know, fully buy into it. Like, that's the original trilogy is the gospel. Then Lucas had prequel trilogy, and it fills in more flavor to the story. These stories really, I think, you know, the newer trilogy, they feel kind of like the extended universe to me still. But they, force healing, we got an episode of The Mandalorian 2 days early on Wednesday before the movie opened up in theaters in the US on Thursday. And I think for the fact that because we have a scene in The Mandalorian where Yoda is using force healing in the TV show, which then of course carries over to Rey force healing the serpent, and then the interaction back and forth between Rey and Kylo or Ben Solo as they require healing. It's fine to me as a Jedi power. I would never complain about that, because I think, you know, you go back to, even there's I don't want to say profession or character archetype in Star Wars with the Terakasi, where through meditation they could self-heal themselves as well. So that part didn't bother me. I think that it bothers other folks far more than it would for me. It seems in line with what Jedis could do. And then we get to the final battle, you know, where the Star Destroyers are all above the planet, and all hope feels lost, and we have on the floor, kind of, you know, or underneath the floor, it seems like so far under that floating rock, the battle between Palpatine and Rey and then Ben together, that really encapsulated Star Wars vibes to me or feel to me. So I really enjoyed that scene a lot. I will say this, I didn't watch that scene and think, you know, there's a million open questions and things, and I'm, you know, after the fact, after watching other people dissect the movie quite a bit, more questions do come up to me, like who are all of the people in the audience all cheering and you know, cheering on the Emperor, and who, you know, built the Star Destroyers, or who's piloting all of these, and the Sith Troopers, which, by the way, just as lame as what I thought they would be. They're just one more in a long line of specialized stormtroopers that are disposable. But I think everybody that questions, you know, who are all of these people, or how did Palpatine get to be, you know, back where he was, there's a long line of those types of questions in Star Wars lore, whether it's who built this original Death Star, to, you know, who were all of these stormtroopers initially in the original trilogy, because we know that they weren't all clones, and who built the second Death Star, and how is that ready so fast after the first Death Star gets collapsed, and who built Starkiller Base. You know, who are all of these people that have continually supported the Empire. So I can't discount seeing those people cheering the Emperor, or the people that could have potentially built these Star Destroyers. It's just those types of questions that you can't really ask when you're watching a Star Wars movie. I think that people are just asking them now because they're less enchanted with Star Wars now. And I think that's maybe because 40 years ago to, you know, 30 years ago, we didn't have that same level of jadedness when it came to Star Wars. It's really just something, you know, originally meant for kids or fans to be able to go to a movie theater, sit down, eat some popcorn, and lose yourself into a science fiction type movie and not worry about what the box office number said Monday morning, and you know, not see it compare or compete up with you know, Marvel movies, or, you know, whatever, Lord of the Rings movies, or whatever else is coming out. I did dig the fact that the saber that Rey constructs, kind of looks like her staff, is a yellow blade, similar to the Guardian, or the Jedi Temple Guardians yellow blades as well. That was really cool to me. The fact that you know, we had the hero saber, or Skywalker saber, snap in half in Last Jedi, and they've repaired it in this movie with like leather around it. I don't really like the way that the repair job looks on the saber. I'm a big fan of the different sabers. I did like Leia's saber. I did like the throwback scene where Luke and Leia were training each other, and you really had the demonstration that Leia potentially might have been a stronger Jedi than even Luke was. I think there was an open question throughout the movie as well that they never tied up, related to Finn, and the fact that when he needs to talk to Rey, and it's kind of, you're led to believe that maybe it's a romantic type thing that he wants to say to her, like maybe he loves her or something, but I think you have other clues throughout the movie, like where he's feeling a connection to Rey and where she is, or, you know, that there's a feeling up on the command ship and things, that Finn is force sensitive, so it's not the end of the Jedi either, and I think that would tie back into what we saw in The Force Awakens, where he's able to wield the saber so well. So there's other pieces that I think we're leaving with, and maybe the next movie isn't completely out of the saga. Maybe this is the last saga movie, but we still get these characters continuing on in the future. I don't know. I wouldn't be against seeing another movie with some of these characters, but it's not necessarily the saga movies. I will say the last piece that I'll chime in on is the fact that at the end of the movie, it's very convenient for Rey to land the Millennium Falcon outside of the Lars homestead, and have somebody come by, and whatever it looks like, it's just a desolate desert all around, and say, "What's your name?" and she chooses the name Skywalker as to want to appropriate or adopt herself into the Skywalker family. I think it makes sense thematically for the movie and for the title to say that it's Rey Skywalker, and she's using that name to honor that name. But on the other side, I kind of sit back and think this was an opportunity for her to clear or to change the perception of the Palpatine name as well. I don't really like that last particular scene. I didn't have a problem with the kiss with Ben Solo or anything at that point, and all the way up to the point of, you know, the choosing of the name just seemed really weird. But overall, like I said, I genuinely enjoyed the movie. There is a lot to enjoy, a lot of stuff to be able to sit back and just absorb yourself into the world of Star Wars. So I'm loving The Mandalorian, by the way, as well. I'm sure everybody else out there is same feeling. I haven't really seen anybody complain about The Mandalorian. But that's about it for thoughts. And I'm sorry it was all over the place and rambled, but I didn't have a sheet to run down, and you guys keep asking when I was going to upload thoughts on the movie. So those are the thoughts on the movie. What did you guys think? You let me know below. But for now, I'm going to sign off. So thanks a lot for coming along. Thank you very much for all of your likes, comments, and subscriptions. Treat others the way you want to be treated. Have a great night. We'll see you guys.